As I stand here as a pastor, as a minister of the gospel, I think with good conscience, and I can't just proceed in this service as business as usual. All of us have witnessed the senseless tragedy that has happened this past week in Atlanta, and I believe many of us are heartbroken and saddened, and even beyond just this particular instance, this is not the first time. This whole year has been just an onslaught, and even beyond this year, but particularly this year has been just an onslaught of one event after another. We see violence, racism, and murder. And I realize as I stand before you here today, here in 2021, that we're living in a culture, and even, may I dare say, in the church where we've become so hypersensitive to politics and agendas. And I want to be very clear, as your pastor, that what I'm sharing with you right here this moment is not just a continuation of the clapbacks that happen on our Instagram feeds and our social media feeds. What I'm addressing to you here today is that what we witness now on a regular basis, or what has been brought to our attention, all of this, I'm not speaking of this as a political issue. This is not a left, right, middle issue. But I'm here to tell you this is an Imago Dei, image of God issue at hand. This is a gospel issue at hand. This is not just a hashtag. This is not just a trending news feed. But we're talking about people, men and women, who bear the image of God. Men and women who are created with value, intrinsic value, because our Creator put His image. And more than that, the issue of our value and our worth, we believe, was settled on the cross. This is the essence, this is the core of our faith. And I think it would just be really just inappropriate for me not to, as a pastor, as a minister of the gospel, just go on and not say something. But I want to take a moment to remind everyone here. I know for many of us, maybe this particular event in Atlanta really hit close to home. Some of us may be grieving. Some of us may be filled with fear. Some of us may be even filled with guilt that we don't feel anything. And I want to let you know, whatever you feel today, we serve a God and we worship a God who sees, who knows, who hears the cries of His people. Amen? He is a God who sees, He knows, and He hears the cries of His people. And I want to really say, as your pastor, and in fact, I want to speak on behalf of all of our pastoral staff and our deacons here at PIF. We're here for you. If there's ever a time for the church to be the church, it's now. And realizing that perhaps these particular events and maybe beyond this whole year has triggered a lot of grief and a lot of trauma. And I want to make myself available, and I want to say that your leaders here are available to just grieve with you, to lament with you, to process with you. And I want to just take a moment to say this as well. Whether you're posting on social media or you're not posting, listen, everyone grieves differently. Whether you're sharing stories that are trending, whether you're not, you're welcome here, you're respected here, and we're here for you. Everyone processes differently. Everybody processes at different speeds. I want to say once again that we're here as the church, and I'm here as your pastor, and we have all of our deacons and our pastoral staff, and we stand by you. And if any of you need prayer or need to just process out loud, we want to make ourselves available to you. And that you could find on the PIF app, and that you could find on our online forum. A very clear way to just reach out and to request some time. And definitely want to do that. But I want to invite us in this time just to close our eyes. And I think it would be really appropriate for us to just take a moment to just pray and to even grieve and acknowledge what we have been feeling as individuals, what we have been corporately feeling as a people, as a society. And if we could also just take a moment to just be silent before the Lord and to understand image bearers, not just names on a post, not just names on a headline. Mothers, sisters, daughters, grandparents, sons and daughters, made in the image and likeness of God, created with value and worth. Father, we come to you clearly not always having the words to formulate and to say and to articulate what's going on inside. And Lord, acknowledging as brothers and sisters in Christ and acknowledging as the body of Jesus Christ that we have those who are deeply mourning today among us. We have those who are deeply grieved among us. We have those who are deeply hurt and afraid among us. God, give us wisdom. God, give us humility. Give us a glimpse into your heart. God, in a world that is charged and infused with political debates and agendas and competing interests, we don't look to the left, we don't look to the right, we don't look to the middle. We look to you. We look to the kingdom of God. We look to your gospel. And give us the wisdom and insight to be able to, with discernment and wisdom, mourn with those who mourn, grieve with those who grieve. And that we would be ones who would shine our light brightly to be in the ministry of reconciliation, to bind up those who are brokenhearted. And Lord, as we go before your word today, Holy Spirit, may you speak and pierce our hearts to the core, that we would be convicted and that we would be changed. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen. Today, we're bringing to a close a series that we've been in for a number of weeks, Windows and Mirrors in the book of Genesis. And I want to reiterate that these characters and narratives and stories that we've been looking at each week, they serve as windows to see the details and the failings and the successes of these particular characters. All at the same time, they reflect back our own flaws. They reflect back our own shortcomings. And it's interesting to see that when we come before the Word of God, and particularly during this series, that we're not just innocent bystanders, we're not just onlookers, but we begin to see our deep flaws. And we move from a place of finger pointing, we transition from this line of finger pointing and judgment to a deep inner conviction that we are not much better than the flaws that we see, than the tainted images that we see, than the mistakes that we see. And I think it's really important, and I want to make this very clear, that as we close, this series, Windows and Mirrors, that ultimately we are to look beyond just these specific characters and these specific stories, because behind each and every one of these characters, whether it be Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, Esau, all these characters, we are meant to look to the author of life himself. And these characters and stories, they're not merely object lessons for Christian moralism, like you should be like Abraham, you should not be like Esau, you should try to be more like Jacob. But ultimately, beyond just Christian moralism, that on every page, every detail in the book of Genesis, in these characters, we are meant to see God himself, the author of these stories, the one who stands as the author of history, that we see his fingerprints everywhere. And the Word of God is not meant to just be a good story, but it's God's own self-disclosure, divine revelation to us, that we see and we can understand, and we could glimpse the heart of God on the pages and the details and the characters of Scripture. Today, I titled my message, God Up Close and Personal. God Up Close and Personal. And as you may know, the final narrative arc of Genesis, it begins from Genesis chapter 37 to Genesis chapter 50. It's the narrative arc of Joseph. And what we see is, beyond Joseph himself, we see that it's the story of God. God intimately and surgically working within the details and the life of Joseph. Some of you guys might be familiar with Joseph. Some of you may have at least seen the DreamWorks film. I think it came out in 2000, Joseph, King of Dreams, right? You can fact check me later. You know, and many of us know probably different anecdotal stories and things like that. You know, and just as a refresher, maybe I want to give you kind of like the Spark Notes truncated version of the story and life of Jacob. Jacob is the second youngest of 12 brothers. His father is Jacob, or Israel, as we saw last week. And some of you may be familiar with some of the more famous anecdotes of Joseph's life. In particular, you may understand, or you may be familiar with the fact that Joseph was favored, right? He was his father's favorite child. His father went to Bloomingdale's, got him a Canada Goose. For the rest of his brothers, Jacob went to the Burlington Coat Factory, went to the clearance aisle. No. But in reality, you know the story where Joseph receives what in the NIV or ESV is a coat of many colors, but actually, if you look at the original Hebrew language a little bit more closely, it's literally translated a coat with long sleeves or tassels. And what these represented was status and importance. So literally, this was who Joseph was amongst his 12 brothers, right? He was favored. And you guys probably remember that while everybody else went to work, Jacob sends Joseph and goes to check up on his brothers, and Joseph comes back to his father and snitches on them, gives a bad report, right? Not only that, get this, you guys might be familiar with this one, right? You know, King of Dreams. He starts having these dreams. This little person, can't think of a nice word. This younger brother begins to have dreams. And you know what these dreams are? The sun, moon, and stars start bowing down to him. And these sheaves of grain start bowing down to him. And his brothers and his parents are like, what does this all mean? He's like, that's all of you guys bowing down to me. Some of you guys, God bless you if you have a sibling like that. But understandably, this kind of triggers a lot of hatred and jealousy. And as many of you know, his brothers conspire against him and literally throw him into a pit or a cistern, right? And then he gets sold off into slavery. And he ends up at Potiphar's house. He's an officer of Pharaoh. Okay? And he works as a slave. He's sold as a slave. Doesn't end there. Like literally Joseph's life from this point on for at least 12, 13 years, it's like 2020 on repeat every single day. Like Joseph's life, every time it looks like it takes a turn for the better, it takes a turn for the worse. He gets falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, right, for sexual assault, and then he gets thrown in prison. He's in prison. And yeah, he gains the favor of the prison guard and all these people. And one day he meets the king's baker and cupbearer within the prison. I hope this is triggering some good old memories of this story. But as you may remember, one day the cupbearer and the baker, they have a particular dream. Joseph, with the wisdom of God, is able to interpret the dream. And lo and behold, it comes true. And the baker is then executed, and the cupbearer is restored to his position in the king's palace. But before the cupbearer is released, Joseph pleads, "Please remember me." How many of you guys have ever said that to a friend or someone you trust? Please remember me. And of course, what happens? He gets forgotten. Interestingly enough, end of chapter 40, it ends with Joseph being forgotten by the cupbearer. But God didn't forget. God remembered. After 2 years, 2 years more in prison, okay? Finally, Pharaoh has a disturbing dream. And he asks for someone to interpret this dream. It's then at that moment where this triggers some sort of memory amnesia that this cupbearer had, and the cupbearer remembers, like, I know a guy. Then he brings Joseph in. And long story short, Pharaoh says, I've been having disturbing dreams, and Joseph not only listens to the dream, but he tells Pharaoh what he dreamed and then interprets it. Right? He tells Pharaoh what he dreamed without getting any prompts or anything like that, and he interprets it. Basically, some of you may remember, it's the 7 fat cows, 7 plump cows, and the 7 skinny cows, and the 7 plump ears of grain, and the 7 skinny barren ears of grain. And basically, Joseph interprets this as this: for 7 years of plenty and abundance in all the lands. And followed by the 7 years of abundance, it's 7 years of famine, of death. Pharaoh recognizes this gift and hand upon Joseph's life, and he promotes him to prime minister, second in command to Egypt. And you know what happens? Joseph, having this knowledge and wisdom from God, during the 7 years of abundance, he creates and administrates all these projects to create storehouses in Egypt, to store up all the food. And lo and behold, after the 7 years of plenty comes 7 years of famine and death in all of the land. Neighboring countries, they are suffering, they're dying of famine. But because of Joseph's revelation, or the revelation given to Joseph, he had storehouses, and people began to come from all over the region. They come to get rations and to get food to survive, because there was none saved up in any other place. And guess who shows up? Guess who shows up at Joseph's door? He's prime minister. He's on top of the totem pole. He's not a slave anymore. He's not some schlep. He's second in command. He's prime minister of Egypt, and he holds power in his hands. And guess who shows up? It's his brothers who sold him into slavery. I want to give you a snapshot of this particular scene after Joseph is reunited with his brothers and he finally reveals himself to his brothers. Turn to Genesis chapter 45, verses 1 through 5. Genesis 45, 1 through 5. Then Joseph could not control himself before all who stood by him. He cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." They came near, and he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." The story of Joseph is actually not just the story of Joseph. More than it is the story of Joseph, it is the story of God, the God of Joseph, the God who is intimately involved in the details of Joseph's life. Notice in verse 5 how it says, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." Joseph said to his brothers, "You sold me here, but God sent me here. You may have been the ones to sell me as a slave, but ultimately I am sent by God." And I want to let you know here today, as people of God, listen here carefully. We may be victims in a moment, but we are not victims for a lifetime. We may have things done to us. We may be recipients of injustice. We may face injustice, abuse, hurt, horrible things. We may even be the ones inflicting those things upon ourselves. We may be suffering from self-hatred. We may be wrestling with guilt for mistakes that we've made. But can I tell you, the essence and the core of what it means to be a person, a child of God, means that ultimately God gets the final word. Situations, things happen to us, but the will of God is what prevails. This is the comforting message of all of Scripture. This is the comforting message of faith, that we are not victims for a lifetime, but we are recipients of grace. We are recipients of God's hands and God's surgical, precise hand working intimately, closely in every single detail of life. I want you to turn to Genesis chapter 50, and I want to give you a quick descriptor. Genesis chapter 50 is after the death of Jacob, the father. So you have to understand at this point, these brothers might have thought, okay, up until this point, this Joseph kept us alive because out of respect for Jacob, who is still living. But now that dad's gone, forget about it. We're done for. And here, listen to this. Genesis chapter 50, verses 18 to 21. His brothers also came down and fell before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in place of God?" Check this out in verse 20. "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they were today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Verse 20, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. Church, isn't it comforting? Christian, isn't it comforting that God's never surprised? God doesn't fall off his throne when something bad happens, when something that we didn't expect or project happens, we serve a God who rules and reigns over it all. I used to think that what this passage meant was that bad things would happen, and then God's like, okay, here's my plan to fix it. Or here's what I need to do. Oh no, what do I do? But I want you to get this here. There's a profound theological foundational truth here that we see. That God is not a reactive God. God isn't someone who just comes up with ad hoc plans when bad things happen. He's not caught off guard. But He is a God who has been working from the very beginning, working in the mess, working in the dark, working in the ambiguity, working in the struggle. And it's interesting. I want to point out this detail, and perhaps you want to check this out on your own time. I'm not going to refer to it directly, but if you look in the chapter of 39, Genesis chapter 39, after Joseph is sold into slavery, he ends up at Potiphar's house. I want you to underline and count how many times this phrase, or a variation of the phrase, the Lord was with Joseph, occurs. When he's sold into slavery, immediately the first two verses says, the Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. After he gets thrown in prison, Scripture intentionally mentions the Lord was with Joseph. The comfort of faith, the comfort that we have in our God in faith, is that in all the moments, not selected moments, not the highlights, but in every moment, moments of rejection, moments of conflict, moments of disappointment, moments of confusion, moments where we feel lost and broken, that we trust, we lean into a God who is above it all, who is in all and above it all. And here's the thing. Though God's presence with us, it seems imperceptible. Like we feel alone. Like, is He really there? Is He really listening? Does He actually care? Like, am I just talking to the ceiling? Am I just praying to the wall? Does God actually care? And the resounding answer that we get in the pages of Scripture, in every single narrative, in every single story of those who have gone before us, those who are with us today, and those who will be with us until eternity, is that God is with us. He is Emmanuel, God with us, God present with us. The greatest gift of grace is not material possessions, it's not physical richness, it's not physical wealth, but it is the promise of His presence. That in every single detail, good and bad, God is at work. God has been working. He's not surprised. He's not shocked. He's not sweating. God does not perspire. God is not afraid. God is above it all and in all at the same time. Hundreds of years later, after the book of Genesis and the stories we read, the great apostle Paul writes in his letter, in the book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 28, and check this out, very reminiscent of what we just read. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. All things work together for good for those who are called according to this purpose, His purpose. You know, I used to read this and I thought that this meant that, you know, if you say, Jesus, I'll follow you, Jesus, I'll be a disciple, that life will be good. I thought this meant life will be peachy, that everywhere I walk, you know, it's rose petals, and I'm like, it's all good. I'm not going to face any suffering or trials. But frankly, that couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is this. It's quite the opposite. Our lives do become a mess. Our lives go into disarray. There is pain, there is darkness, but in the pain, in the darkness, in the disarray, there is God and His presence who is right beside us, right with us. The comfort and the hope and the joy of the gospel is not circumstantial in that these things will never happen or things will never go badly or all things will always be good, but that there is a good God who is present in every single ugly moment, in every single trial, in every single tribulation, in every single moment where we feel hopeless. There is the God of hope who is right beside us. There is the advocate. There is the one who stands beside us. He is the one with us in the fire. He is the one with us in the flood. He is the one who stands beside us and promises us to never leave us nor forsake us. The comfort of the gospel is not in a God who eliminates suffering, but a God who is up close and personal in the suffering, in the trial, in the bad, in the ugly. And you know what the crazy thing is? Church, listen today. We serve a God, we look to a God, we worship God, we hope in a God who is not bound by a script. He's not bound, let me be a little bit more specific. He's not bound to our script. He's not bound to the limitations and the imperfections of our own doing. When I was in 10th grade, I just tell you a little bit about myself. When I was in 10th grade, I was blasted with the love of God. I was on the mission field. I was in Kenya, and I had been to church all of my life. Literally, all of my life, like since the womb. I went to church, I left, and I never really experienced any lasting change, but I was blasted on the mission field with the love of God. I can't explain it. It wasn't anything I did, but I was just met with the unending love of God on the mission field, and my life changed forever. I came back, and all of a sudden, I began to realize that God, for the first time, God had a purpose for me. And I used to think that that when God gives you a purpose, that you got it all figured out. You got plan A, B, C, D, and you have it all figured out. But I quickly found out that's not how it works. So be encouraged today if that's you feeling like that. First thing God pressed on my heart is God spoke to me, and He's like, I'm going to raise you up, and I'm going to choose you to be a leader in worship. I was in youth group at the time, and I didn't play an instrument. I mean, I played the clarinet, but obviously in contemporary worship, that doesn't really fare too well. He's like, I want you to lead worship. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I would sing, and I would feel the anointing depart from the room. I couldn't hold a note. But for some reason, God called me to do that. I went in obedience. It wasn't pretty for a long time. Next thing I knew, my junior year, God speaks to me again in my prayers, and He began to prompt me that He wants me to go into ministry. He wants me to be a preacher of the gospel, and I began to have just revelations each and every day. When I read the word, I felt burning in my heart. And I knew that God was giving me words and messages to share with His people and to those who did not know Him. But yet, when I tried to share those things, it did not come out. I was someone who literally, if I was told to give a presentation in school, and we all hate those oral presentations, literally in high school, middle school, literally both legs would just start shaking. I would look like a mess. Literally, this leg would just involuntarily go like this. I'm out of the frame. I apologize. I was someone who couldn't even look someone in the eye in a one-on-one setting and speak to them and articulate a thought clearly. That's who I was. I said, God, seriously? Me? Like, what are you thinking? I want to let you know here today, church, and I want you to hear me clearly. The very fact that I'm standing here before you is living proof of God's grace. It's living proof that God works in every single detail of our lives. I haven't arrived yet, clearly. I have a long way to go. But if we were to look upon the fabric and the entirety of our lives, and all the things that God calls us to. You know, there's that cliche Christian saying that God won't give you more than you can handle. That is a lie. In fact, God will call you to things. God will bring you to situations. God will call you to do things that you can't do apart from Him. What's the point if you do it all on your own strength? What need do you have for God if you could do it all by yourself? Where is the need for grace if it was all up to your good looks and your charisma and your skills? Church, today, I want to encourage us. I want to speak a word into you that it may look bad. It may look dark. Your life looks imperfect. Things don't look ideal. God has called you to do something. And you're like, I can't do it. Can I argue with you for a second? Maybe you're in the perfect place. To be before in a place, in your journey of faith, in your walk with God, when He brings you before a crossroads, when He brings you before a task, when He places a call upon your life, and you don't see it, you don't know where it's going to come from. The invitation of grace is right there waiting for us. And can I tell you, sometimes we allow the old script, what has happened, what people have labeled us as, the script and the narrative that has been written for us, whether it be by society, whether it be by our parents, whether it be by those who know us so well. But to know in our hearts that the one who writes our scripts is the Lord Jesus Christ. The one who writes not on tablets of stone, but on hearts of flesh. The one who is able to rewrite our scripts is the God who is Lord over us. God gets the final word over our parents, over ourselves. There is grace and hope in the uncertainty, in your imperfections. Can I say that Jesus is someone who says His strength is made perfect in weakness. We have a God, and listen to this is the gospel here. Jesus does not just conquer death. Jesus conquers through death. Right? Jesus isn't someone who just conquers on the cross, but He is someone who conquers through the cross. The symbol of suffering, the symbol of evil, the symbol of that which was reserved for the harshest of punishment, for the most evil of men. Jesus, through the cross, dispenses His grace and His salvation. Through His acts on the cross, He is able to give grace. I want you to think, church, about this for a moment. You may have heard it said before that sin separates you from God. Sin separates us from God. You know what the crazy thing about the gospel is? It is in the imperfections. It is in the sin. It is while we were still enemies, while we were still far off, while we were still sinners, that the cross of Jesus Christ is extended to us. Here today, I want to invite us to the table of grace and mercy. We look at the tapestry and the fabric of our lives, and we may place our own judgments on how our lives are and what we have amounted to. People may evaluate us, give us feedback, unwanted feedback sometimes. People may have placed labels and even given us nicknames. But it is the author of life himself who gets to write your story. Who doesn't need a perfect canvas, who doesn't need a perfect situation, who doesn't need a blemish-free, stain-free life to give grace, to give forgiveness, to give purpose, to give calling, to give hope today. Can I invite us right now to stand, church? We're going to respond, and I want to lead us in this for a moment. As you are standing here this afternoon, some of us, we may feel that we stand upon our accomplishments. We may stand upon our successes. We may stand upon the highlights of our lives. We may feel like we stand, some of us, on the guilt, on the imperfections, what didn't work out. The areas of our lives that are spiraling out of control. The very parts of our lives that we have lost all hope in. We find ourselves standing on these things. We find ourselves having a script, a story of our lives laid before us. And many of us, we've accepted the script. The script, the sum total of our failures and successes. This is what I stand on. This is what defines me. This is what dictates the next years of my life. This is what makes who I am. This is who I am. My Myers-Briggs, my Enneagram. I love those, by the way. This is who I am. Can I tell you, the gospel of Jesus says that He can change you. He can transform you. It looks imperceptible. You fall a bunch of times. You mess up. You screw up. More times than you would like to share or admit. But the grace of God is not far out of reach today for you. The heart of God is what is on display all throughout the pages and the tapestry of Scripture. Genesis is no exception. The heart of God, which extends an invitation to His people time and time again. A God who waits for His people. God who waits for His people.